it doesn't go. Okay. I'm about to join it to see what it looks like.
Oh, no, stop.
Shira The Rebbe Rashab from Lubavitch. And he was sitting with his Hasidim, and the Rebbe Rashab, the fifth Lubavitch Rebbe, Rashab, so the practice was that it was a special niggun that they would sing before the Rebbe Rashab would give a mic. The Rebbe Rashab would say over a mic, very intense, it's very serious. The Rebbe Rashab had said literally for years that it was continuation. Like the road structure goes for only. So there was one time that they were singing the Nigunim. They were singing the Nigunim, a special nigun that they would use to prepare themselves for the mimer. The Rebbe Rashab's nigun that they would sing before the mimer. And the Rebbe Rashab noticed that everyone was singing the nigun very, very quickly. They were rushing through the nigun. And they were rushing through the niggin because the Hasidim were so eager to get to the mimer. And the Rebbe Rashab stopped them and he said, no, that's not how you sing. That's not how you sing the niggin. The Rebbe Rashab said, a Jew who's a pnimi, a Jew who's an inward type of person, has to be present where he is at every moment. And even if a person is looking forward to something that comes next, so a person who's a pnimi, a person who's an inner person, a person who's connected to the moment, understands where he needs to be at that moment. And you don't rush through the niggin as if you're checking it off a list in order to get to the mimer that comes after. I think of this story not because we have nigunim. I certainly don't say ma'amarim. I think of this story because Rishon Bar Yochai is very much trying to help us to become Jews who are connected to our pnimius. Like the Rebbe Rashab said, being a person who's a pnimi is a person who knows how to be present in that moment. And that's what Rishon Bar Yochai is asking of us in these moments. What exactly is this? Is this a Hilula, like BaOmer, Talmidei Rabbi Akiva? It's a lot of different things that are happening, things we understand, things we don't understand. But in order to be respectful of the Baal Hilula, in order to be in the place of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and to tap into his legacy, a person has to understand what it means to capture a moment. One of the great Hasidim of the Alter Rebbe was a Chassid by the name of Shmuel Munkes. He was a big Chassid, and he was also a big jokester in a heilig way. He was known as a big prankster. So one time he was trying to get to the Alter Rebbe. He wanted to spend some time with the Alter Rebbe of Lubavitch, the Baal Tanya. And he couldn't afford to hire a wagon to go on his own, but he figured if I could find someone who's going to Liadi anyways on business, so I'll be able to hitch a ride. So he found this fellow who was this wagon, this driver. He met a fellow in the marketplace, a businessman who dealt in alcoholic beverages. He was traveling to Liadi on business. And he asked if he could squeeze into the back of his wagon. So he said, sure. He said, no problem. So he's sitting on the back of the wagon. And the front of the wagon was more insulated. The back of the wagon was very much out in the open. It was very cold. He's sitting there amongst the barrels of alcohol in the back. And at one point he turns to the wagon driver and he says, it's freezing back here. Is it okay if I take a little bit of vodka from one of the barrels to make a l'chaim to warm up a little bit? So the wagon driver was a nice fellow, and he said, sure, help yourself, take a little something. So Shmuel Minkus, opened up one of the barrels and he took himself a little something to drink. He comes to Liadi, he comes to the Baal Tanya. He says, Shalom Aleichem to the Baal Tanya. Gives him a big Shalom Aleichem. So excited to see his Rebbe. And he says, Rebbe, okay, I think my business is done here. So he says, Shmuel, he came all this way, he traveled all this way, he just got here. He said, I understand. You came out. He said, yeah, I was coming to the Rebbe because I needed to be uplifted. I needed to be inspired. So he says, but you came all this way and now you're leaving already. We didn't talk. We didn't learn. We didn't daven together. Nothing. So Shmuel Munkes says, no, I got everything that I needed on my way here. I got all the inspiration. I got all the clarity that I needed on the way here. So he says, what happened on the way here? So he tells him this story. I'm sitting in this wagon and it's cold and I took something to drink. He said, and I got exactly the message that I needed. He said, I don't understand. What are you saying? So he said, I was sitting with all these barrels. He said, when I finally took a sip out of the barrel, when I finally took a little swig of that vodka, so I felt warmed up. I was so cold. I was surrounded by barrels and barrels of vodka, but it was only when I took a little bit inside of myself, when I drank some of it, when I ingested some of it, I was able to actually receive the effect of that which I was surrounded by. And he said, and I learned that to be a chassid means to be able to not just surround ourselves by it, but to allow it to penetrate into us, to allow ourselves to absorb. It's one thing, to say, Rishon Bar Yochai, there's a koach in the world right now. I was so nispal. I was watching earlier today, I was watching what was happening in Eretz Yisrael. And sure, am I allowed to start listening to the Nigunim already? It's not like BaOmer here, but it's like BaOmer there. I don't know. I don't know. I was watching mostly without audio, just watching Jews, in Meir, being swept up by Rishon Bar Yochai, and ingesting the Nigunim of Rishon Bar Yochai, and ingesting the Torahs, and ingesting the whole Tzvi of the Kedusha of the Holy Tana Rishon Bar Yochai, and to realize that a person, again, you could be surrounded by it or you could be in it. And the Avodah Rishon Bar Yochai Is not to be surrounded by it, is to be in it. Rishon Bar Yochai calls upon us tonight to tap into a part of ourselves that maybe we don't usually have access to. In Torah, there's pshat, there's remez, there's drush, there's sod, there's different dimensions. There's different levels of Torah. And sometimes in the realm of pshat, it's hard to see. On the pasha pshat, sometimes a Jew loses a little bit of his Yiddishkeit. B'derech pshat. In the remez, in the drush of a Jew, but there's a sod of a Jew. There's a secret of a Yid. There's a dimension of a Jew, as the Beis Aaron of Rav Aaron of Karlin said, that Rishon Bar Yochai brings out a part of ourselves. Rishon Bar Yochai is able to have a hakara and appreciation of even the lowest Jews. Even a Jew who's a little bit lost his way, or a Jew who lives a little bit superficially, or a Jew who doesn't know what it means to be a pnimi, doesn't know. He can be surrounded by all the good stuff, but doesn't know how to take it in. He can be a Jew who's rushing through life. He's just singing the niggin to get to the mimer, but he's never allowing himself to be in the moment. Rishon Bar Yochai allows us to strip away some of that chitzonius. There was a minhag that the tzaddikim spoke about. The people used to take begadim, they would take garments, and they would throw their garments, not the ones that they were wearing per se, although maybe sometimes, they would take some of their garments and they would throw it into the fires, into the Madura by Rishon Bar Yochai. Sam Sober talks about it in his tshuva. Is it Baltashlis? It's not Baltashlis. With Yeshua's Malko, of Yeshua of Kutna, of Shila Kutna, he says that the idea is that we're going back to the world of Adam Rishon Kodem Achei. We're getting back to a part of ourselves that's our best self. We only wear begadim because Adam Rishon lost his way in Gan Eden. By stripping away those outer layers and throwing them into the fire, Rishon Bar Yochai, we're saying, I don't want to be a chitzonius yet, I want to be a pnimius. So the avoda of tonight, and again, we're just beginning that journey together. There's so much to try to say, and there's so much to think about. There's so much to daven for. There's so much to ask for. We're trying to tap in. Rishon Bar Yochai is inviting us to tap into that sod of ourselves. Rishon Bar Yochai is saying, I want you to be a pnimi. Rishon Bar Yochai is the one in the Gemara in Sukkah who says to his son Rabbi Lazar that how sad it is that so many people in the world are not b'nei aliyah. And as Tzaddikim explained, it's not about being a b'nei maila. It's not about whether or not you're going to reach that madrega. But a ben aliyah means a person who's striving for something bigger. A ben aliyah is a person who says, I don't want to be a superficial person. I want to be a big person. Will I get there? We'll see where Hashem takes me. But do I at least have big hasagos? So I want to be a deep Jew. Do I want to be a Jew who's connected to the realm of sod? Rishon Bar Yochai helps us to discover our best selves. Rishon Bar Yochai helps us to be in the moment. Rishon Bar Yochai helps us to absorb all of those things that are surrounding us and to strip away some of that chitzonius, those outer layers, and to allow the pnimius to be revealed. So I'll just end this hakdama. It's something that I've been thinking about a lot. If you've never seen this clip, it's so kedai to see. The Lubavitcher Rebbe on a Yud Beis Tammuz for Brengen, I think the year was 1984. Amazing video. I'm just happy to share with anyone who wants to see it. Lubavitch was so masterful at recording all of the Rebbe's Torah, not just in terms of publishing it. Big tzaddikim, big talmidei chachamim, the chayzrim who memorized the Rebbe's Torah and wrote over the Rebbe's Torah and then reviewed the Rebbe's Torah, but they were way ahead of the curve in terms of actually recording, not only in terms of the audio but even the video. I mean, video of the Rebbe, amazing video of the Rebbe for hours, giving out dollars on Sunday afternoons. The Rebbe by Fabrengens. So in 1984, Yud Beis Tammuz was an amazing video. One of the guys behind the camera, whose job was to record the Rebbe. Meaning he was working. He was working at the Fabrengen. He wasn't present at the Fabrengen. He was working at the Fabrengen. It was his job to make sure that everything was recorded properly. So the Rebbe points to him at one point. The Rebbe looks up at him, and he gives him a signal. He says, gives him the motion, like make a l'chaim. And the Rebbe calls him over. The guy who's working at the event, the guy who's certainly not part of the Fabrengen, he's an outsider looking in. And the Rebbe says to him, for a moment, do me a favor. He said, just forget about your profession and make a l'chaim like everyone else. Don't be here as a cameraman. Don't be here just to record the event. Don't be here as an outsider looking in. But allow yourself to be a person who's actually, Dr. was saying, just be a chassid of Lubavitcher Rebbe. Allow yourself to be in the moment to just experience what's happening. And again, that's what we have to try to do tonight. Rishon Bar Yochai is inviting us not to be outsiders who are looking in, but to allow ourselves to be insiders, insiders to the world of Rishon Baruch Chai, and insiders to our own lives. Okay, so as we sing now, as we daven, as we try to tap in, allow ourselves to, again, we all have a million and one things on our mind, a lot of things going on. On one level, it's a Wednesday night. On another level, it's Lag BaOmer. And we may be far in space and in time from Rishon Baruch Chai, but to allow ourselves to be insiders, to be pnimius dikayira, to be Jews who are able to let go of that chitzonius, to let go of our profession, wherever it is we're holding in the world, and to just be in the moment. Of course, to Yehuda, to Eliza, again for really putting so much time and effort into making this such a beautiful gathering. The Chavod the Heilige Tana Rashbi. Shaki said to me before that he saw me the last couple of days sitting in shul, and preparing a lot of different things, but definitely spent a lot of time the last couple of days trying to figure out what to say. It's impossible to not speak about what happened last year in Meron, but it's equally impossible to speak about it. It's impossible to not speak about it for very obvious reasons. When Klal Yisrael goes through a difficulty, when there's a tragic loss of life, in a way that none of us can even begin, even a year later, to wrap our heads around, and especially that there should be someone from our own neighborhood, Nachman Daniel ben Aryeh Tzvi, Alav Shalom, was watching videos today from Yeshivat Shalavim. Was watching the Boyana Rebbe light a candle for the 45, a yahrzeit candle for each of the 45 individuals whose life was snuffed out last year in Meron. And it would be cruel, it would be antithetical to who we are as Jews to not remember and to not think and to not talk about, not try to make sense of some of that pain. But it's equally impossible to speak about such a thing, such an event, such a tragedy on a day like Lag BaOmer. Because the deeper you go into the sugya, the more you try to understand what Lag BaOmer is. It's the antithesis of everything that happens. Lag BaOmer is a day that's supposed to be a day of healing. It's a day of refuos, harofe l'shvurei leiv, mechabesh l'Atzvasam, like we say in Psukei de Zimra. Teres Yeshua of Jikov says, harofe l'shvurei leiv. Shvurei is the same osis as Rashbi. Rishon Bar Yochai comes to heal broken hearts. Place of Rishon Bar Yochai is Oz v'chedva v'mkomo, as all the tzaddikim talk about. Rishon Bar Yochai is the Melitz Yosher of Klal Yisrael. Lag BaOmer is the day of the bittul of the Avelis of Talmidei Rabbi Akiva. It's a time where we celebrate in the most cryptic of ways where Rishon Bar Yochai taught us how to transcend Misa itself. Rishon Bar Yochai in the Zohar died on the word Chaim. He died on the word life. Tonight, of course, is Chai Iyar. It's a man where everything is screaming at us to celebrate life, to be misameach in life and a pneumistic life, like we were saying before. And I was learning a lot this week from the Bluzh of Rebbe, the Tzvi Tzaddik. He says so many Ramazim, he says so many deep Torahs, and I saw so many things that were so connected that in some way, in a very pneumistic way, help us to try to understand in some seichel-dik way how such a thing could be. But it's not the time, it's not the place. And it would take many, many, many hours to even try to say it in a way that wouldn't be painful or hurtful or confusing or misleading. And that's not what we're here to do. What we do know about Lag BaOmer is the thing that we don't know about Lag BaOmer. The whole inyan of the world of Rashbi, the Torah of Rishon Bar Yochai, is that it's a world of sod, it's a world of secrets. It's a world that unlocks and at the same time conceals. It's revealing and concealing at the same time the world of sod. Rishon Bar Yochai in his final moments was revealing the deepest secrets of the Torah. But the question that every Jew asks on Lag BaOmer is, I'm not a makubal, I'm not a big tzaddik. Rishon Bar Yochai saw good by us, of course. Amichulim tzaddikim. Rishon Bar Yochai revealed all sorts of wonders of creation, the mysteries of how HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs the world, the Zohar, the Sod, the secret. Like I said, we try to enter into that secret place. We'll sing in a little bit. Bar Yochai b'kodesh hakadashim, a place that most people can't go, a place that most of us feel we're not entitled to go. Place we don't really know how to go. V'hazar hakarev yumas, a place where a zar, or someone who's an outsider, someone who's not a pnimi, like we were speaking before, has no place there. But on Lag BaOmer, the zar becomes a raz, becomes a sod, it becomes a secret. Raz means a secret. And we all try to find our way into that mysterious place of Kodesh Kadashim. We try to have that face-to-face encounter with the HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And we try to embrace the mystery of how HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs the world. It's a time where we say that even though we don't understand anything, we understand everything. That's what Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was trying to give over to us. And that feeling of not understanding, of not being able to make sense of really anything, not understanding what is a neshama, not understanding what is good, what is bad, why are things like this, why are things like that. That whole secret of life can be very depressing or can be very calming. It can be very depressing because I feel frustrated. How could it be? How could it be? You can spend your whole life asking questions, tainas, complaints. Or it can be very calming when you accept that there are things that are much bigger than us and they're real. Those things that are bigger than us are real. That the way that Hashem runs the world is confusing, but it's real. I just read very recently Rav Gadol Eisner, and I hope this story is not misinterpreted because it's a story that stings a little bit. But Rav Gadol Eisner was a Holocaust survivor, a Ger Chassid. After the war, he was talking to a Jew who was very, very broken by what he had experienced, what he had seen during the war. And he said to Rav Gadol Eisner how angry he was at HaKadosh Baruch Hu, how disappointed he was in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, how confused he was by the so-called God of the world. And Rav Gadol Eisner said a shocking thing. And again, I hope it's not jarring in a bad way, but it's emes. And sometimes emes can be hard to ingest. Rav Gadol Eisner said to this fellow who was clearly grappling with his emunah, and it wasn't his judgment. Rav Gadol Eisner, if you know who he was, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, was not a person who judged. He was always about being mechazek yidden. So Rav Gadol Eisner said to me, if I was the Kadosh Baruch Hu during World War II, I would have done everything exactly the same way. This fellow was very taken aback. He says, how could you say such a thing? He said, because let's think about what you're saying. Let's think about exactly what you're saying. What you're saying by questioning HaKadosh Baruch Hu is you're saying that Hashem doesn't know what he's doing. And the only reason that we think that Hashem doesn't know what he's doing is because we truly don't know what Hashem is doing. But Rav Gadol Eisner said, but if I was a HaKadosh Baruch Hu, what I meant to say is that if I understood the way that HaKadosh Baruch Hu understood, then it would all make sense. So if I was a Kadosh Baruch Hu, I would do everything the same way. Of course, as an outsider, as a person who's not a Kadosh Baruch Hu, I don't understand any of it. But if I was a Kadosh Baruch Hu, I would have done everything exactly the same way. Because the Kadosh Baruch Hu knows what he's doing. That's a hard thing for us to have the humility to swallow. But that's the truth of Amunah. That's the truth of Amunah and Bitachon. Bar Yochai b'Kodesh HaKadoshim, in a deep and mysterious place. Moshe Rabbeinu is begging HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Moshe Rabbeinu is begging HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hodi'eni naster achecha. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, explain how this whole thing works. The Gemara in Brachos Daf Zayin, Tzadik V'Ralo, Rasha V'Tovlo. The world doesn't seem fair. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we don't understand the cheshbonos that you have. Lo machshava sai machshava seicha. And then a few psukim later, Moshe Rabbeinu says, give me a glimpse. Har'eini na'as kvodecha. Show me your kavod. Show me how the whole thing works. To which the Kadosh Baruch Hu says back to Moshe Rabbeinu, lo sucha liros es panai, ki lo yir'ani ha'adam v'chai. Because you can't live and encounter me at the same time. And yet somehow Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who all the tzaddikim say was really a Gilgal of Moshe Rabbeinu. So many connections between, again, we don't have time for them now, Moshe Rabbeinu and Lag BaOmer. The very words Lag BaOmer is Gematria Moshe. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai somehow understood that. On his deathbed, in those moments of Misa, he was declaring Chaim. He died on the word Chaim. He was somehow revealing that secret that when a person leaves this world, it's a Pesach, it's a portal into the next world. Rabbi Shimon Pasach, he's always Pasach. In the Zohar, Rabbi Shimon's always Pasach. Hashem is always opening. What's he opening? He's opening up the Torah. He's opening up dimensions of ourselves. And he's opening us up to deeper realities of the world. Hareini nas kvodecha. Moshe says, please, Hashem, let me catch a glimpse. Explain it to me. Let me see how this whole thing works. Hareini nas kvodecha is Gematria, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, he understood it in a way that we can't understand it. But he understood that sometimes greatness, illuminated Torah comes from a dark cave. Yeshua Bar Yochai understood that light comes from a place of darkness. And when Yeshua Bar Yochai comes out of his cage, he's physically broken. Rav Pinchas ben Yair, his son-in-law, as he's bathing him, he's crying over the pain of looking at such a broken individual. And Rishon Bar Yochai says back to him, no, you're looking at it all wrong. He says to his father-in-law, he cries out, Pinchas ben Yair, the Heilige Tanah Pinchas ben Yair, Oy li, shirisicha bekach. It's so hard for me to see you like this. I don't get it. How could you be like this? How could this have happened to you? To which Rashbi responds, Ashrecha, shirisani bekach. I'm so happy that you're able to see me like this. But you're so broken. He says, you're so broken. And Rishon Bar Yochai says, no. Because if you wouldn't see me like this, lo matzasi bikach. Had I not gone through some of those difficulties, I never would have, had I not been in that dark cave, there never would have been a Zohar. There never would have been an illuminated Zohar. Rishon Bar Yochai was no stranger to pain. Rishon Bar Yochai was no stranger to suffering. Rishon Bar Yochai always gave us a perspective of somehow, he showed us how, in some way, he reveals to us in a way that we don't even fully understand. But he reveals to us in a certain way that it somehow it all makes sense. The very first teaching in Shas, the very first time in Torah Sheba'al Peh we meet Rishon Bar Yochai, Brachos Daf Hey Amud Aleph. Rishon Bar Yochai said, Shalosh matanos tovos nasan HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yisrael. There were three great gifts that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave to the Jewish people. The three best things I could possibly give you, Hashem says. V'kulan lo nasan ela al yedei yisur. But there's only one way to get them. There's only one way for a Jew to get these things. The gift of Torah, the gift of Eretz Yisrael, the gift of Olam Haba. There's only one way to get those things. And it's through Yisurin. It's through difficulty. It's through challenges. It's through going through things that we don't understand. And therefore the day of Hod Shebahod, Lag BaOmer. Hod Shebahod. What does that mean, Hod Shebahod? You see it in the Architectural Siddur. Maybe you say if you're really pious, you say the little tefillos after counting Sfiras HaOmer. What's the sod? What's the secret? What's this night about? Hod Shebahod. The glory of glory. What's Hod? What does Hod mean? It would take a long time to explain it properly, and I still wouldn't be able to explain it properly because I don't know how. But the idea of Hod, if one were to look at the 10 Sfiros, the way that they were printed in a Kabbalistic chart, Hod is on the left side. Hod is actually the lowest of the Sfiros on the left side. It's not the lowest of the Sfiros, but it's the lowest manifestation of a Kadosh Baruch Hu on the left side. The left side is Midas Hadin. The right side is Chesed. The left side is Din. Hod Shebahod, in a certain sense, is the lowest of the low. And yet it means the glory of glory. There's a certain beauty that comes from a place called Hod. Hod is the Midah of Aaron HaKohen, the one who goes into Kodesh Kadashim. Hod Shebahod is Kodesh Kadashim. It's a place of bittul, of surrender. It's a place of being thankful. It's a place of admission, of confession, of saying that I don't know. The Hod Shebahod, the beauty of Hod is being able to somehow recognize beauty in difficult things in life. And it's very, very hard. It's not easy for a person to say that to oneself and to say it in an emistic way. It's certainly not something that anyone could tell someone else to feel. But that was the world of Rishon Bar Yochai, to find that or in that place of choshech. To realize that when I don't understand something, that itself is closest to Hashem. That's a dveikus by Hashem. It's not a surrender of feeling frustrated. It's a surrender of acknowledging something so much bigger than myself. There was a Rav who once came to Rav Aaron Chernobyl. And he wanted to ask Rav Aaron of Chernobyl a pshat in a Zohar. He didn't understand the passage in the Zohar Kaddish. He comes to Rav Aaron of Chernobyl and he says, Rebbe, can you explain to me this passage in the Zohar? So Rav Aaron of Chernobyl says, I don't understand. Why do you learn Zohar? Why do you learn Zohar? He says, why do you learn Zohar? So this fellow says to him, I learned Zohar because when a person learns Zohar, it's makadesh a person. It sanctifies a person. It's such a holy text. It's spiritually cleansing. So Rav Aaron Chernobyl said back to him, he said, but I don't understand. He said, let's be honest, the Chumash is holier than the Zohar. The Chumash is the word of Hashem. Rashbi was Kodesh Kadashim. But the Chumash is holier than the Zohar. So why don't you learn, if you want holiness, why don't you learn Chumash? So he says, Rav Aaron is explaining to him, he says, a person doesn't just learn Chumash, because when you learn Chumash, you think you understand. There's a pshat to Chumash. There's a bunch of pshat. If you don't understand pshat, look at Rashi. Rashi, as he writes in Bereshis Gimel, comes to say pshat. So when you learn Chumash, you think you understand. Why do we learn Zohar? Rav Aaron Shinover said, because the Kedusha, the tar of the Zohar, comes from what? From that surrender to a text that shows me how little I understand. And that's a cleansing thing. But if you're going to come to me and ask me to explain to you the Zohar, then you might as well learn Chumash. Because the Chumash you understand. You don't learn Zohar to understand. So what do you mean? So what does it mean? So what was Rashbi giving us? He gave us something we don't understand. But again, that world of understanding and not understanding at the same time. The Hod Shabahod. The beauty of surrender. The beauty of admitting how little we know. The beauty of acknowledging that there's something so much bigger than us in this world. Benji shared with me some Torah from Rav Shmuel Zucker from Eretz Yisrael, Shlita, that he shared last year, about a week after the horrible tragedy in Meron. And I want to share some of it with you for a couple of minutes, because I think he captured it. I was saying to Rav Benji, it's such beautiful, such sweet Torah, and it's so on point. And it's so much this idea that I'm trying to share with you tonight. In the Zohar, it describes that when Rabbi Shimon left this world, Rabbi Shimon spoke about how his life was Bechad Ketira Iskatarnadai. My whole life was one big hiskashrus in the Kadosh Baruch, always connected, dveikus, always in the hands of Hashem. That idea of being makusher, the idea of being Bechad Ketira. Ketira is the lashon of ketoros. The ketoros was also these 11 different spices that were packed together, that were somehow put together in a remarkable way, and they're brought by Kohen Gadol into Kodesh Kadashim in a unique way on Yom Kippurim. Bar Yochai b'Kodesh HaKadashim. What's the Indian of ketoros as a lashon of iskashrus? What's the Indian of Kodesh Kadashim? What's the Indian of the ketoros, the 11 spices of the ketoros? What does that have to do with Rashbi saying my whole life was one big ketoros, was one big life of being connected? So in the Bryce of ketoros, in the Bryce that describes exactly what we put in the ketoros, what we don't put in the ketoros, the Bryce says, "Ilu hayanoisin ba kurtav shel davash." If we were to put davash into the ketoros, ein adam yachol lamod b'fnei reicha. The scent of the ketoros, no one could handle the scent of the ketoros. So if I were to ask you, if we were to pause right there and learning the Brisa, and I were to ask you, so why don't we put dvash into the ketoros? Because it would be overwhelming. And then we ask the kasha. We say in the Brisa, "V'lama ein ma'arvin ba dvash." No, so why don't we put dvash in? We just said why you don't put dvash in, because we wouldn't be able to handle it. Why don't we put in dvash? B'pnei Torah amra. Because the Torah says, "Ki kol soor v'chol dvash lo saktir imenu yishel Hashem." Because the Torah says we don't put dvash in the ketoros. So the tzaddikim explain. I first saw this idea in a sefer called Shalos and Tshuva's Ginza Yosef. Not sure if Zucker saw it. It's an amazing idea. What's the question? You told me you can't put dvash in the ketoros because you wouldn't be able to handle it. Yeah, but why don't we put dvash in the ketoros? Because Hashem said so. Because Hashem said so. Because ketoros, the real definition of is kashrus, what it means to live a life of real connectivity to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is because Hashem said so. I don't have to understand. You could try to explain you don't put the dvash in the ketoros because as a human being it would be overwhelming. Or you could more simply say we don't put dvash in the ketoros because Hashem said don't put dvash in the ketoros. The Gra in Mishlei explains that the concept of dvash, that sweet honey, dvash is sometimes associated with understanding in a certain way. When a child starts to, so many children, when they get their upshare on Lag BaOmer, and we review the letters, so we put a little bit of honey on either a chart with letters, right? And the child's able to taste the sweetness of understanding. The Gra writes in Mishlei, in several places, that dvash is Rashi Tevos Deya, Bina, Seichel. understand the things that I get. But in the world of Ketores, there's no place for Dvash. In the world of real Hiskashers for Kodesh Baruch Hu, in a world of real Dveikas by Hashem, it can't be based on my understanding of things. I can't have a relationship with the Kodesh Baruch Hu that's limited by my understanding. Moshe Rabbeinu can kick and scream, and we should also. There's a part of us that screams to Hashem. It makes sense of it all. Reveal yourself. Hareini nas kvodecha. Explain how this makes sense. Where's the beauty in this? Where's the glory in this? Hod shabahod. Where's the beauty of this? Where's the greatness of the Midas Hadin? There's an amazing Me'er Shilach in Parshas Emer. Me'er Shilach goes through 5 questions that we as human beings ask on a Kodesh Baruch Hu. Again, we don't have time to go through it now. But the Me'er Shilach says every Jew is a Kohen. A Kohen means an Oved Hashem. And every Jew wants to understand the ways of Hashem. And every Jew wants to understand how there can be Midas Hadin in the world. How does the Kodesh Baruch Hu, who created the world, Lahativ Labrios, how does the Kodesh Baruch Hu allow so much Midas Hadin? Hod Shabbat is such Midas Hadin. And yet it's the Simcha of Rashbi. How could that be? And he writes here so beautifully, he says, and a person who doesn't believe in a Kodesh Baruch Hu is not bothered by this kasha, because everything's random. Bad things happen. Everything's random. It's a world of Nikra. But a world a Yid who believes in Hashgacha Pratis, who believes that there's a Borei Olam, so he's not satisfied by a world that doesn't make sense. It has to make sense. There's a God. There's a Cheshbon. There's someone responsible for all of this. But that only makes me want to ask the questions that much more, because I expect more from a Kodesh Baruch Hu. And he describes the different questions that we all have on a Kodesh Baruch Hu. And the first thing, this past Shabbos, for Chutz La'aretz Jews at least, Parshas Emor, the Shabbos before Yom Tov always leads us into the Yom Tov. The first thing a Kohen and Eved Hashem struggles with is L'nefesh lo yitama ba'amav, is a question of death itself. How could it be a Kodesh Baruch Hu that there's such a thing as Misa in the world? How could it be? How could it be? And yet we trust that a Kodesh Baruch Hu knows what he's doing. And he goes on to explain how later in the Parsha in Emor, when it goes through the 5 Yom Tovim, each of the Yom Tovim is an answer to one of the questions of a believer. Not a question of a heretic, a question of a believer. The question of a Jew who says, on the one hand, the Kodesh Baruch Hu, you put me in a world where I feel like I can be an Eved Hashem, and yet sometimes we go through such harsh things in this world that I feel like I'm spent. I have no kochos left to be an Eved Hashem. That's the Kohen who's a Baal Mum. He's a Kohen, but he can't serve in Beis HaMikdash. He's neither here nor there. You know what the answer is to that second question? It's the second Yom Tov after Pesach is Shavuos. On Shavuos, when we stood at Har Sinai, all of the mumim, all of our imperfections, all of our disabilities were healed at Har Sinai. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I know on the surface right now it looks like there's a lot of brokenness, but you'll see it's all going to be healed. Harofei l'shvurei lev, the whole thing is going to work itself out. So we can't put dvash into our Ketores. You can't put your own intellectual understanding into your iskash with a Kodesh Baruch. Bar Yochai b'Kodesh HaKadoshim, when Yom Kippur, the Kohen Gadol goes into Kodesh Kadoshim with that Ketores, and he places it down before the Kruvim, in the presence of the Kruvim. The Kruvim that rest on top of the Aron, transcending the Torah. The Kruvim, which is the face of a child, the sweet, innocent face of a child who doesn't have the questions and the burdens and the heaviness that we as adults face in this world. The Kruvim, which are on top of the Aron, on top of the Torah, like a crown that's worn on top. Tzaddikim even explain, and I saw it today, I'm so happy, I got a picture from an old friend, an old Talmud of mine who lives in Mishkafayim, near Beit Shemesh. He sent me a beautiful picture with his son riding on his shoulders. That practice that you see, if you went on to, if you clicked on the live stream from Meron today, you see people carrying their children on their shoulders. That's not stam, just, a good way to get your kid around or to hang on to him among the crowds of Meron, but that's actually part of the avoda. The tzaddikim explain when the child goes and sits above the parent's head, it's the reminder of that sweet innocence of the child who doesn't have questions. The child who's just happy to be and understands Hashem in the simplest way without any without any philosophy, without any deep wisdom, but is just connected because of a sweetness. The way that a child is connected to Hashem without deya, bina, and seichel, without any devash, without any understanding. A child is able to be mukusher to Hashem. So Kohen Gadol brings his Ketores into Kodesh Kadashim. And he places it in the presence, the place where he's reminded that the child, the sweet innocent Kruvim, can transcend the Torah. On a day of Lifnei Hashem Titaru, on a day of purification that comes from surrender to a Kadosh Baruch Hu, washing ourselves clean on Yom Kippurim. Titaru, the Sfarim says, Gematria Keser. It's like a crown. It transcends the intellect. It's something above the head. And that's the purification that we're trying to tap into tonight. The love of a parent and a child that transcends any logic, where the child becomes bigger than the parent, with all the understanding of the parent. But what would we give for the sweetness and the innocence of a child? And that brings us to the final Mishnah on Maseches Yoma, where Rabbi Akiva, the great Rebbe of Rishon Bar Yochai, who's so much a part of this Yom Tov that we're celebrating. Amar Rabbi Akiva, we'll sing it in a few minutes. Mirz Hashem, Ashreichem Yisrael. How fortunate are we, Klal Yisrael? What are we so fortunate about? Ashreichem Yisrael. Lifnei mi atem mitarem umi mitar esem. Where does our Tara come from? Avichem Shabbat Shamayim. It comes from what? From the love that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has for us as Knesset Yisrael. The love and the selection of the Jewish people that transcends any logic, that no one can explain, and Rabbi Akiva is not done. Rabbi Akiva says, Ma mikvah mitar setzameim. The Rambam writes, when he's describing the Tara process, the Rambam says, can anyone explain why a mikvah works? Why does a mikvah work? How is it different than a bath? The same water, looks exactly the same. But tell me it's rainwater, I can make a rainwater out of a bath. What's so special about it? Has the ability to transform from tamei to tar. It can make a non-Jew into a Jew. By taking a bath? How does that work? The Rambam says it's a chok. Says Rabbi Akiva, Ashreichem Yisrael, the love that a Jew has for Hashem and that Hashem has for a Jew, that kesher shel kayama between Kudsher Brichu and Knesset Yisrael, it transcends any logic. That Ketoris that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai lived with in Kodesh Kadashim, it transcends any logic. It's like a mikvah that's mitaras tzmeim, Ava Kodesh Baruch Hu mitaras Yisrael. It's something that we completely fail to understand. We allow ourselves to immerse ourselves in it. So like Rav Soloveitchik said, the response to tragedy is not why. The Jew doesn't come to ask why. Kohen is Gematria Bitachon. If we want to be a Kohen, if we want to be a real Kohen, and every one of us is a Kohen, we're Mamleches Kohanim V'Goy Kadosh. So a Jew doesn't ask why. The Jew leans into his Bitachon. The Jew says, okay, so now what? So what do I learn from it? How do I draw closer to Hashem from it? How do I draw closer to each other? How do I undo some of the pirud, that separation, which is the antithesis of Ketores, the antithesis of Kodesh Kadashim, the antithesis of Rishon Bar Yochai, b'chavivusa talya milsa, where everything was chavivus, everything was closeness. How do I find that hod, even in a place of hod, in a place of bittul, in a place of surrender, in a place of confusion? The Gemara in Makos says, just 2 more minutes. The Gemara in Makos says, Amar Rava, the Alida Ime Rabbi Shimon, a bracha for all the Jewish women of the world. Every Jewish mother who's going to be blessed with a child, she should be zocha to have a child like Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. The Alida Ime Rabbi Shimon Teil. If a woman gives birth, you give her a bracha, you should be zocha to have a child like Rashmi. V'ilo, says Rava, a very stark thing. V'ilo lo teilet. If you're not going to have a Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai like child, then it may be better not to have children. V'afagav the islu pircha. The Gemara says, Rava says, and even though that the drasha that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai gave, very technical drasha, a line before Makos Daf Yud Zayin, the drasha that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai explained, even though Rava says I have a kasha on everything he said, I can ask point by point on every single thing that he said. Nonetheless, I give every Jewish woman a bracha, she should have a child like Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. And then Rava goes and he explains, he picks apart the pasuk and he shows, oh, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai got everything wrong. But none of it makes sense. The whole thing makes no sense. I have a pircha, Rava asked a stark kasha on everything he said. So the Gemara says, Elamai dialida imek Rabbi Shimon. So then why did you say such a strong bracha that if you're going to have a child, you should be blessed to have a child like Rabbi Shimon Yochai, if everything he said is backwards and wrong? If none of it makes any sense. So Rava says, Dilamai desvirale lididei, because the way that Rabbi Shimon Yochai explained the pasuk, and I know we're missing context here, the way that Rabbi Shimon Yochai explained that pasuk that he was expounding in Makos Daf Yud Zayin, misares le lekra v'darsh. He took the pasuk piece by piece, and he understood it. He explained it. Misares, he inverted it. He learned the whole pasuk backwards. You'll take a look on Daf Yud Zayin if you have the headspace for it. Very complicated drasha. He learned the whole pasuk backwards. He built his whole mahalach by learning the pasuk backwards, and that is so creative and so brilliant that everyone should be blessed to have a child like Rishon Bar Yochai. Even though Rava says I have a kash on everything he said, but he knew how to learn the pasuk backwards. He knew how to read the whole thing backwards. However, we know we're in an olam hafach. We're in a world where everything is backwards. My father always explained. My father's an ophthalmologist. My father always explains how the eye inverts every image that we ever see. The relation between our mind and our eye, to be able to flip over an image, to take an olam hafach or isi, like the Gemara says in Psachim Daf Nun, and to make sense of it. And in Rishon Bar Yochai, Rav is revealing to us, it's a secret, this Gemara. Rav is revealing to us that even though Rishon Bar Yochai leaves you with a lot of kashas, the world of Rishon Bar Yochai doesn't offer answers. It's hod shabahod. He's revealing and concealing at the same time. It's that bridge between Misa and Chaim, which none of us have any hasaga of. It's Kodesh Kadashim, a place we've never been. It's a place where we're not allowed to include Deya, Bina, and Seichel. Our Dvash has to be left aside. And yet, somehow, Rishon Bar Yochai comforts us by showing us that even if you read the pasuk backwards, you can uncover amazing things. Even in an olam hafach, even in a confusing and backwards world, there's still beautiful things to see. Bar Yochai nasa adam nemar bavarecha. When Moshe Rabbeinu was writing the Torah, Moshe Rabbeinu said to Hashem, I cannot write those two words, na'asa adam. Let us make man. What do you mean us? Who's us? That's the greatest opening for heresy. People are going to say there's more than one God. People are going to deny the truth, the validity of Hashem. And Hashem's response to Moshe Rabbeinu is, you write the words. The people who want to see how I meant it, the people who want to interpret the Torah, even though it's confusing properly, are going to see the truth. And the people who want to be confused by it, or want to have tainas and spend their whole life being embittered by it, and if you want to be an atheist, you want to be a kofar, you'll be a kofar either. Even if I write the Torah perfectly. Kadosh Baruch Hu put a word, a phrase in the Torah, Nasa Adam, let us make man. Moshe says, it's so confusing. Why are you making the world confusing? And Hashem says, the people who are going to get it are going to get it, and the people who are not going to get it are not going to get it. So when we sing Bar Yochai, Nasa Adam Nemar Bavarecha, it's because of people like you, Rishon Bar Yochai, that Hashem could write the words Nasa Adam in the Torah. Hashem says, I'm not afraid to make the world a little bit confusing because it's going to be tzaddikim who can reveal and conceal at the same time. We're going to teach us to make sense of suffering. They're going to teach us that the matana tova of this world, Rishon Bar Yochai's first teaching in Shas, the matanos tovas of this world come from a place of Yisurin. And therefore, on a night like tonight, on a day like today, with faith, with bitachon, with bittul, with humility, with amunah, with a simcha of something we don't fully understand, we celebrate the sod of the world. Hareini nas kvodecha is gematria Rishon ben Yochai. We don't understand, we don't get it, but it's a glimpse. It's a glimpse of something we can't understand. We can never explain. We can never make sense of what happened last year in Meron. It's not our job to try to say nice Torahs to explain tragedies. But I'm telling you, the more you enter into the world of Rishon Bar Yochai, the more you enter into that space of Hod Shabahod, that world of Torah, that world of Kodesh Kadashim, the world of Amunah, the world of Bitachon, the world of Bittul, the world of making sense of things that don't make sense of an Olam Hafach or Isi, the more a person can be comforted, even in difficult times. So Kadosh Baruch Hu should help us to have that emunah, to have that bitachon, to recognize that sod that is found not just within the world, but within our worlds, in each and every one of us. That sod of the Torah, that sod of our neshama. And Amir Hashem in this way. Rishon Be'ochai will give us a lot of nechama. The world needs a lot of nechama. The world needs a lot of healing. Harofe l'shvurei lev, shvurei rashi tevos rashmi. Harofe l'shvurei lev. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should heal all of the broken hearts. And we should be zocha. We should be zocha to experience tchiras hamesim, to dance with those kadoshim whose lives were taken from us last year in Meron, to dance with the Rishon Be'ochai, all the way from Meron back to Yerushalayim, to see the Beis HaMikdash from here.
Amen. Amen.
He's got the good
Yeah. Oh my gosh, she was talking so good. Yeah.
Sorry, I wasn't able to play on the speaker.